Hello, sorry about that, mate. It was just sorting the laptop's my iPad screen out.
Don't worry about it, man. It's sound. It's great to see you again. How are things? You right?
Good, thanks, mate. Nice to see you. How are we? How's things?
Yeah, man. It's good. You know. Fucking.
We've gone fully Adidas stuff on the shoulders here.
You what?
We've both gone fully Adidas stuff here.
Oh, have you seen the lineups for France Germany?
Not yet.
Oh,
Let's have
dear
a
me.
look.
That looks like it's going to be a good game of football,
Let's have a look.
especially when you look at France's front three essentially. Um, Germany obviously aren't what they used to be, but still makes it for a promising game of football.
Ooh, that France line up something, isn't it? Tasty. Oh, no Luca D. No, Lord.
Ah, I know. Poor Luca. Who was it? Hernandez?
Yeah.
Yeah, thought so.
Got no width, though. That's all.
Hmm.
Unless Mbappe's going to pull wide. Because Pavard's more of a centre-back, but he plays right back for them,
Yeah,
doesn't he?
yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's going to be a good game. Even their team's pretty good.
No, I know. Be a cracking game of football. Um, I know the pair of us will probably want to go and watch it, which at 8 o'clock kickoff, so we'll get
Yeah.
going with this.
Okay. We're happy to hear you say that.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we're going to talk about Ancelotti leaving Everton, but at the same time, I don't want this podcast to be filled with misery. So, are you enjoying Euro 2020 so far?
I am so far, yes.
Yeah. At the end of last season, I could have quite gladly not seen a ball kicked until August, to be honest with you. But as I was saying, like, I have really enjoyed it so far. It's had a bit of everything, which you'd expect an international tournament to have. I mean, obviously there was the really sort of shocking and unfortunate scenes with Christian Eriksen, and it's good to see that he's on the mend again. But you know, Italy kicked off with a massive 3-0 win, and Portugal just managed to come out with
Oh,
a
Max, sorry, have we started already? I didn't know whether you'd started it off yet.
yeah, man. I don't. I'm trying to just do it naturally. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
sorry, I was like, that's why I gave you like a one-word answer before, because I was expecting to go, hi, welcome to the Carlyle podcast and all
Nah,
that.
man.
So sorry, if you want to start again, that's fine, but I was like, is we started? Because you were
Man,
talking more like officially.
8 o'clock kickoff, innit? You got to get going. You know what I mean?
Right, you can either start again or we'll just leave that in. It's up
I
to you.
don't mind. We'll leave it in. It's funny, innit?
Fair enough.
Go on. But I mean, it's had a bit of everything, hasn't it? You know what I mean? Like I was saying, big wins, great performances, like Patrick Schick against Scotland the other day. Unfortunately, David Marshall's turned into a bit of a meme as a consequence of that. God love him. But yeah, what have your thoughts been on the tournament so far?
It's been brilliant. It's been one of the best Euros I've seen for a while already. Just every game, like for the most part, it's been brilliant. Um, they've had great goals, great performances. That goal from Patrick Schick is just, it's just the absolute cheek of it to hit that, and it's just been really entertaining. It's not that every game's been end to end, but there's been a proper contest in every match. I think a lot of it is down to a lot of the teams are playing at home in these games. So, Spain are playing in Spain and, England are playing in England and so on and so forth. And that will change as the tournament goes on. And I actually didn't like the idea of that at first.
It's interesting,
I
though,
liked
isn't
it
it?
all self-contained, but in practice, it's worked so far. But yeah, it's been brilliant. Other than the, obviously, I was going to say unfortunate incident with Christian Eriksen, but I think I'm going to choose to view it now as that amazing example of what the medical professionals in stadiums can do. Just the work they did and the reaction of the Denmark players. Other than that incident, it's been fantastic throughout. And even then, if you look at it like that, that incident was fantastic on the medical professional side, just because of how brilliant they were in their reactions.
Yeah, certainly. You're very right to bring that up. They deserve full credit, and it does bring to light, there's been so much focus from this country's perspective on the NHS, given the sort of state of emergency over the last year. But again, to come to light in such a massive occasion such as that, I don't think we can stop talking about it. Really, they really, from a payment perspective, they're here to get paid what they deserve. But you raised an interesting point, which I have found really interesting and strange, obviously, given the fact that we are in a pandemic. But countries playing within their home nations, obviously, like you mentioned, it saw England win, I believe, their first ever opening game at a European Championships. And I was out in town for the game, and it's very, very strange, Terry. I've seen people walking around with like old England shirts wrapped in Union Jack flags with the St. George's Cross painted on the face, and I was like, that's not the town that I remember, to be honest. Went to an Irish bar, so it'd just be a bit quieter and the atmosphere would be a bit more subdued. But at the same time, I'm not one of these massive anti-England scousers, as many are. Like, one of my best footballing memories is going to watch England play Germany at Wembley, and following Germany ever since. But that aside, like, is it purely, obviously with you being older than me, you can probably speak more to this, is this Scouse not English attitude? Obviously I understand that from a political standpoint, given the the historical relationship with Merseyside and the state, and I probably agree to it. But from the footballing perspective, the Scouse not English sort of philosophy, is that purely derived from the political relationship, or is that something different?
No, I think it is all from the political aspect of it. I don't think it can be separated from that. I think on a purely footballing basis, most supporters of it, Premier League teams at the very least, most supporters of Premier League teams care more about their club and their country, but that doesn't stop them from all around, all these other clubs around the country supporting England as well. So, like Watford fans will support England, and Bournemouth fans and Arsenal fans and Newcastle fans, whoever, wherever. But there's a stark political divide in terms of this city and the rest of the country. I would hazard a guess. I've got no numbers on this. This is just a hunch on my part, but I can remember under the last Labour government there wasn't such anti-England sentiment in Liverpool that there is now. Whereas 10 years of Conservative government, and every single one of the elections, and there's been more than usual in that time, has always gone to Labour in Liverpool, but the Conservatives have won vast swathes of seats in the rest of the country. I think the divide is breaking up along, you could build a wall around Merseyside at this point where, there's Labour heartlands. Even with the last election, all the red wall heartlands around the rest of the north and the northwest, even they went Conservative. So Liverpool, in a political sense, apart from parts of Wales, in terms of the England dynamic, feels a little bit isolated. And you see, some of the behaviour from the England fans, booing the taking the knee and all that, and that just reinforces that political divide. I think if we had a massive Labour majority, say, in the country, which we've had, in my lifetime, I think England wouldn't be seen the same way by people in the Merseyside area, because we wouldn't feel the resentment towards the rest of the country, because we'd be on the same page in something that's almost as important as football, politics.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment to that, I think. And like, obviously the people that I was referring to before walking around, for those that don't know, kitted out in England kits with St. George's flags and they're like this, obviously students. Now, I'd never in my lifetime known Liverpool city centre, to be such a hub for like students. Like, I go out most weekends and see the same people from the same places, same faces every weekend, but now it's just absolutely drowning in students. And to be honest, I enjoyed the experience a lot more just watching it in a laid back in an Irish bar. And as I say, I'm not the most anti-England scouser in the world, but I did think it would be funny if Croatia nabbed an equaliser toward the end. How about yourself when it comes to England as a national team? Like, are you just nonplussed, or like, do you actually want to see them do well?
No, I'm not really. I'm not interested in it, but I wish I was. Like I was when I was younger. Like, I remember Euro 2004 when, we threw away a victory in the last seconds against France in the opening game. I remember crying my eyes out at that, really upset about an England game. And as the years have gone on, and probably not long after that, I've switched my brain flipped where I didn't care about England anymore. And I think part of it is, I'm affected by the wider point that I mentioned before about the rest of the country. I feel disconnected from the rest of the country. But it doesn't come naturally to me, and I do wish it did, because I love tournament football. I think the World Cup is the best part of football. I love Everton. They're like a marriage. They're like, the my team. They're like, you're with them through and through all the way, even if they annoy you sometimes, even if you love them sometimes. But World Cup is just pure joy. That's like a lad's holiday. It doesn't last very long, and you love every minute that you're there, and then another one doesn't come around for several years. And I see all supporters of other countries, you see all the Dutch fans with all like the orange all over them, and you see the Danish fans and they've all got the red on them, and I see the England fans, which is my country, and they've all got the white and the cross and what have you. And I just don't feel that vibe. I can't force myself to do it. It doesn't come naturally to me. And I think this is one of the best parts of football, international tournaments. And I enjoy it for the fact of it's tournament football. But I feel like I'm missing a key part of it. And I don't think there's anything in particular that could change that now. I think it's too late for me. I think once you lose it, it's gone. And it's not even the play. There's a lot of likeable players. You look at the England squad and they've got, some great players from other clubs, like Jack Grealish, brilliant player. Everton's own Calvert-Lewin. There's a lot of players you can like in the England squad. But I don't care if they win or lose. Yeah. If they got to the final and I was watching an England in a World Cup final, which I've never have, obviously, I'd support them then because I just have to. But if they went out to the semi-final again, I wouldn't lose a wink of sleep. If Everton went out to the semi-final of of any cup, I'd be mortified. It's just a different thing, and I think that's shared by a lot of people in Liverpool and Merseyside especially.
Yeah, that's very right, because it's not exactly jealousy, but when you look at other nations and the sort of nationalistic pride that they have, it's almost as if the sort of patriotism is sort of universally accepted from those different parts of the world, especially like when you look at South America. For me, is a place that's always interested me when it comes to national pride. Like you look at the Copa Americas that are going on, it's similar to what you're saying about the Dutch and the like, and I feel like when that's expressed from an England standpoint, I think Luka Modric, I think it was, who recently came out with a quote that hit the nail on the head for me. That there's just very much an arrogance associated with that English pride and whatnot to come through in the journalists, and I think I can't remember it word for word, but I think he might have mentioned the fans in there. Would you say that's sort of an accurate assessment when it comes to showing a English pride, especially because we're on the sort of outside looking in?
Yeah, the journalists definitely get a little, something comes over them, and they sort of they become hypercritical. Like they should, they don't accept. They all come together. They're sort of unofficially or officially teamless when they're talking about Premier League. They don't always acknowledge who they support. Some of them you do know, and they cast at least on paper, a neutral eye over everything in the Premier League. But then when they cover the international game, they all become fans and very expectant, very, very hard to please fans, and that does breed an arrogance. So every defeat is a disaster, and there's a blame culture, and they always look to pick out any player who's made a mistake. There's no, international football for other countries. I assume I've got friends from other countries, but that's obviously anecdotal rather than data. But they all. The national team is a unifying thing. They all want to defend their national team and stick up for them, whereas our journalists and a lot of our fans want to blame them and tear them down. Unless they win the World Cup, which they haven't done, unless they win everything, then there's always a blame to be cast and aspersions to be cast on certain players and certain aspects. And I think this will be true of a lot of countries, but we know it in true detail in England. The national team has been, and the national flag, let's be honest, has been adopted and sort of taken hostage by jingoistic right-wing groups. So it's hard to disassociate that when you live in a country where, George Cross flags and, what have you, you don't immediately think of national pride because they've been sort of co-opted by fringe groups who are very radical and very hard to like if you're not politically aligned with them. So it's a complicated issue. Most other people, I think, love their country's national team, warts and all, but the warts and all is a little bit too much for some people here, especially myself.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. Some really good points there, and even something that I thought was quite interesting was well before kickoff, journalists are tweeting out the starting 11, which I think in a social media age, just my opinion, and I'm sure there are people that share it, I think that's one of the worst things that you can do before the opening game of a major tournament. And I don't know, Terry, as you say, maybe as the tournament progresses, and that was, without a shadow of a doubt, that was a big win for England, especially if you sort of take in the context of Croatia, where the one that dumped them out of the World Cup semi-final a couple of years ago. So going forward, maybe not the favourites, but certainly in with a good shout of winning the tournament. And I mean, we can come back to that later on to sort of end the podcast on a higher note, but to delve into a bit of Everton misery now, and just a bit of a pre-warning if people do want to tune out. It's been 2 weeks now since Carlo Ancelotti left Everton Football Club, and we pretty much know the man that's going to come in and take his place. Sort of why I sort of held back on the whole managerial merry-go-round and speculation at the time. But before passing comments on that, I just want to ask, were you as pissed off as everybody else when that went down? I think it was the 1st of June anyway, on that day. And in the time that we've had between then and now, have your feelings changed now that you had time to accept it?
They certainly haven't changed. I feel the same now as I did then, and I feel distraught, heartbroken, crestfallen, devastated. All any words you can use to describe feeling very sad at that news. I didn't believe it. I refused to believe it at first, and then I transitioned into not wanting to believe it, and I haven't reached acceptance, and I don't think I ever will. I was a card-carrying Ancelottiista. I loved the man. I loved him as a manager. I still do. He's done the dirty on Everton, but could you really say doing the dirty when Real Madrid come calling for you? Clearly the sky fell in at Everton when the news came, and I mean, right to the top of Everton. I don't think anyone at the club was prepared for this to happen. So if they weren't prepared, how can the supporters be prepared? I think it was an absolute, natural disaster in footballing terms.
Yeah, 100%. I am at the same point as you entirely with those feelings of anguish and distress. One difference, though, is that I now really intently dislike the man for doing a complete U-turn on his values. I'm wondering, and is it just that when Real Madrid come calling, you can't say no? Is that why you just don't, you can't bring yourself to dislike him? You just sort of rationalise it with that?
Yeah, I mean, I might get there and end up being angry about it, but I can't see it. We've had Everton have had a lot of managers in recent years, and we've always let them go on our terms. They performed very poorly, and we decided it was a time for a change of direction. Only 2 managers have left against the wishes of the club, and that was David Moyes when he didn't sign a new contract and he was going to Man United, who at the time were the best club in England and certainly still one of the best clubs in the world. And now Ancelotti, who didn't have any time to process that move, it happened very much overnight, went back to Real Madrid. Now, it is a little bit Real Madrid came calling. You've got to remember, Everton have taken players and certainly taken managers off other clubs because we were bigger than them. Watford and Southampton did what they were told when Everton came calling, and that's just the way it goes. And we've done the same thing when Real Madrid came calling, as much as we don't like it. I don't think, from my point of view, I don't think it's a straight up Ancelotti had to go back to Real Madrid. I think he got a good look under the bonnet at Everton and saw the work that needed doing, and decided that at this stage in his career, that the job at Real Madrid, if you can believe this, was probably less pressure and less work. He probably had more. You know what I mean? He is a mechanic of luxury cars, and he would rather try and fix a luxury car than try and fix a knackered old, Fiat 500, which still runs but just barely. I think he felt more comfortable in his comfort zone, and clubs like Real Madrid are Carlo Ancelotti's comfort zone and what he's excelled at for most of his career, managerial career. Everton's rebuilds, I think he was up for it when he went in, but when the option came up to sort of work less, he took the option to work less.
Okay, that's a good perspective, and it certainly sort of shifted my view on it, and that I do agree with your point that fixing luxury cars has always been his sort of specialty. But the fact that, me and you have been covering this football club for many years, and we've seen us go from Sam Allardyce to Carlo Ancelotti, and we're still none the better for it. And the fact that Carlo Ancelotti's gone into the football club, obviously, all for the project that he keeps referring to it, wanting to lead us into the new stadium, as per his quote, getting a good look on the infrastructure at the club and what was needed to do in regard to, shifting the dead wood and the financial side of things, maybe, from a playing perspective, and just not fancying it really does break my heart, because that says to me that Everton have literally made no progress since the investment of 2016, which we longed for so long under David Moyes. There was always that shout that, if Moyes had money, then we'd do all right. Obviously, not David Moyes, but the club finally get money, and still not any closer to European football than we were those years ago. That shout of not having made any progress since 2016, is that something that you agree with, or do you look at sort of different factors like, the development of the new stadium, which we received an update on today, or the likes of having England's number one, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison? We've got some, highly prized assets in playing terms at the club. Do you deem that as some sort of progress, or just blanket statement, you just don't think we're anywhere near where we should be?
Yeah, I would agree that we've made no progress. I couldn't sit here and say we've made any progress. When you look at, the 5 years since 2016, our average league position has been ninth, and we've spent £500 million in that time. And I think the team of 2016 would beat the team of today quite easily. So how we've allowed that to happen is just bizarre. But there's no mystery behind it. There's a lot of money and resource being ploughed into the club, but it's, there's holes in the boat. Doesn't matter how much water you scoop out. If you don't plug the holes, then it's going to keep leaking out and coming in rather. So you've got different people with power at the club with different agendas and different, let's just come out with it. The summer of 2017, we had different people seemingly buying different players at great expense, and it has hamstrung the club financially in terms of the profit and loss accounts and the financial fair play aspect of things, which is a whole complete other topic. But we've never recovered from that. We've got directors at the club and managers, and that's changed over time, and they're all playing different songs on different instruments all at the same time, and all you can hear is noise and a mess. But the only shining light is it's never too late to start making progress. Because I believe that Carlo Ancelotti he had started to make progress. I know he finished 10th, but he got 59 points, which is 2 less than David Moyes got when he finished in the Champions League places. It's not worth a damn now because he's left, so his record will say 10th. But if he'd carried on for several more years, you could possibly have pointed to that season as, well, there's more to it than that. But obviously it won't be built upon by the man who achieved it. So it just counts as a false start, basically. But yeah, it's never too late. But the problem at Everton is not the strategy. There's been several strategies, but Carlo Ancelotti himself even said in his book that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and the culture at the club is wrong and needs to change. You can have all the plans in the world and all the new directors and all the new managers and the new ideas, but if the culture at the club is one of mismanagement and spinning in place, then it's always going to spin in place. And I think the changes need to be made at a much higher level than the managerial or the director of football level. I think they need to be made at the very top. And that doesn't mean people losing their job. I think different talents and different personnel being added can be the key.
Okay. I've had 3 questions come to mind just off what you've been saying there. One on the actual tactical side of things and playing progression under Carlo Ancelotti. The second being on the whole in the boat point, and that essentially recruitment. But what I want to ask now is about that culture. Everton traditionally, from what I've brought up and sort of fed and taught, is that the culture of Everton Football Club has always been one that other football clubs have aspired to and held in very high regard. You date that back to John Moore's, the 60s, the 80s, even under David Moyes, when essentially he was the man that pulled the trigger on every single footballing decision, as we didn't have a director of football. It was literally only like Elston and Ken Wright above him at that time. Is that change in the culture at the club, or the need for a right culture at a football club, has that changed with modern football, air quotes?
No, I think the traditional Everton culture, if we embraced that back when we had it, could have been, sustained, and we could have built with that. But when Farhad Moshiri came into the club and all the new opportunities that his money brought with us, I think we didn't know what we wanted to be. We sort of wanted to be a metropolitan, big corporation club, but we also wanted to be a small family club, and we also wanted to be, a team that plays, the right way, in air quotes, and we also wanted a team that, produces its own young players and sells them for profit, but then we also didn't want to sell our best players. We didn't know what we wanted to be. So we tried to be everything, and it doesn't work because the results are there. The team has stagnated. Thank God it's only stagnated. We haven't, the worst can happen to clubs, than just sitting in 9th on average every year. But there's the owner of the club has shown his commitment several times over. He's put a lot of money into the club, but he also needs to show restraint. He needs to make better decisions and appoint better people to make those decisions for him. He's brought in a new director of football in Marcel Brands. He corrected the mistake of hiring Steve Walsh. Steve Walsh is not this pariah that everyone thinks he is, but he wasn't a director of football, so he identified that a change needs to be made, and he made it. Fair enough. But you hear these stories of, Farhad Moshiri buys his own players still on the advice of agents, and he's got to be talked out of things by Marcel Brands. And I'm not even saying Moshiri's a big problem, but I think he needs to, Everton's board is like 3 people strong, I think. But he's not on the board, for example. Farhad Moshiri is obviously the overall owner, majority shareholder, but it's Bill Kenwright, Marcel Brands, Denise Barrett-Baxendale, and Sasha Ryzantsev. Sasha Ryzantsev just does the commercial side of things. Denise Barrett-Baxendale is the CEO. Obviously chairman Bill Kenwright, and the director of football and Marcel Brands. That is a tiny boardroom for a massive multi-million pound corporation and organisation. And there's different identities there within those 4 people. So I think new best-in-class appointees to the board should be brought in with an overall, nothing, we won't relitigate Bill Kenwright's time at the club here, but a new chairman who can oversee the direction that the club needs to go in and want to go in, and new fresh people under him can make that happen. Because right now we've got the old, we're trying to get on the internet on an old ham radio. Basically, the old apparatus is in place. We're trying to do the new technology. It's just not working.
So essentially, appointing new shareholders and board members with, and the most important point being, a shared vision long term, where everybody can go in the same direction as season by season, agreeing on long term and short term and long term goals in a sense. And that brings me to my second point about the holes in the boat and recruitment, is that we've seen almost this meteoric rise from Marcel Brands since he's come into the club. Obviously, really highly regarded from his time in Dutch football, with a history of astute recruitment and players that he's progressed in their careers. But I have found it particularly strange, and I don't know whether I'm for or against it, the fact that he's sort of advanced in the club in such a short space of time now, as you say, landing a seat on the board, from going from director of football, which I do think we needed, by the way, as you say. Our old model was quite outdated, and we did need a director of football, as so many top European clubs do. But the fact that he's now on the board, yet it seems not fully in control of football and operations, which he should be, is that heaping too much responsibility on his shoulders, or do you think that that's a decision that will work in Everton's favour in the long term?
Well, I personally don't think he's got all the responsibility on his shoulders. I think he'd prefer more, because, as I was saying about as you said about the different directions being pulled in at the club, Marcel Brands is the director of football, and for what we understand, runs everything day to day, but he hasn't got the final say on so many aspects of the club. He should be, and if he proves to be not good enough to do this, it will bear out quickly and he can be replaced, but he should be the complete master of all recruitment, incomings and outgoings.
Okay, let me rephrase the question then. Is it immature from the traditional Everton board, in a sense, to recruit this man, see he's got a good track record, and push him so far as to being a member of the board, when I don't recall him ever being a member of the board at a previous club?
No, I don't think it's immature. I think that's one of the better things they've done. Okay. I think they should give him more power, personally, because he is the only one on that board with any footballing expertise. There's people who are good on the board in other aspects of business and other aspects of the Everton business, but I don't believe any of them could match Marcel Brands' knowledge of player recruitment and talent spotting and team building and what have you. I think it was a good decision to push Marcel Brands to the board, because that's essentially how the model works in other countries. Now, it's always worked. It's still pretty new in England, but I just think he should be allowed to do his job more to the fullest capacity. I think he runs into roadblocks in certain aspects of the job he's meant to be doing. So, under 23 manager has a big say in how they run, rather than just answering to Marcel Brands, because he's the director of coaching and director of the academy. This hasn't all been under Marcel Brands' time, but it's been all while we've had the director of football. Roberto Martinez brought several players with him from his previous club, and Ronald Koeman brought players, and Marco Silva's brought players, and Ancelotti's brought players. So basically there's no through line that bringing a director of football should bring you of recruitment strategy. It's just a mismatch of previous managers' favourite toys that they brought with them, and the next manager always has to make them fit together, and it doesn't. Every manager started a new jigsaw with different pieces, and now we're trying to make a picture, and it's just not a picture. We've got a bit of a mountain, bit of a sky, bit of a train, bit of everything else. Whereas if a director of football was allowed to do his proper role and given the full authority and power to do that, then it would always be the same picture, just with different variations in it. Whereas we're clearly not seeing that. We're seeing other people come in and have too much of an influence on what should be Marcel Brands' job. I think he should be afforded more power, and I think appointment to the board is one of the only good things that we've done since we've had the model in.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective, and one over time I hope that I will reform to, I guess. I'm in such a dejected position at the moment. And on that, leading into the question about recruitment, several questions, I guess. Do you think, obviously, we're at this standpoint now, we're feeling very sad, as you said, and dejected about Carlo Ancelotti jumping ship, when everything that he said pointed to that he wouldn't. Do you think that Carlo Ancelotti leaving the club and someone new coming in to develop a relationship with Marcel Brands could work to the benefit of the club in every sense, I guess? Because Carlo Ancelotti did seem like one of those people, as you said, that Marcel Brands was butting heads with, especially from a player recruitment perspective.
Recruitment-wise, I don't know. I think Marcel Brands' most difficult job now that Ancelotti's gone will not be managing the new manager, managing downwards. I think it'll be managing upwards. It'll be keeping a lid on Farhad Moshiri and, the ideas he's got. It's his money, so he's going to always have a say in who comes in and who doesn't, but he needs to try his best to get a grip of that. Marcel Brands' relationship with the new manager will depend entirely on if he chooses the new manager. Directors of football on the continent, apart from very odd, particular, cases, typically clubs with very eccentric, strong, owners, the likes of Napoli, the likes of Real Madrid, they will choose the new manager of their clubs, whereas most clubs will leave it to their director of football as part of his brief to appoint managers that match the vision and match the players they've got. So if the choice of next manager, whoever it may be, is a Marcel Brands choice, I think that will click and be much more fluid than it has been for a while, than if it's a appointment that he disagrees with but he goes along with and tries to make the best of, because he's not a miracle worker, but it doesn't always come down to that fit. Carlo Ancelotti clearly wasn't a pick from Marcel Brands to be the manager, but while Brands has been here, Carlo Ancelotti's been by far the best performing coach with largely the same players. So if the manager's good, Brands will work well with a good manager. They're better than he will a bad one that he picks. So it just depends on the quality of the manager.
Okay. Now, that leads me in a sense to what you said earlier about you believe that there was some short-term progression under Ancelotti, and given several years that you would have thought that we would have progressed in a direction that we wanted. Just made a note of it. Carlo Ancelotti had 556 days in charge of Everton, which was less than both his reigns at Bayern Munich and Napoli. 31 wins, 14 draws and 22 losses. Before talking about tactical progression, highs and lows for you during that time, as I know we didn't really get the chance to discuss his reign as it was going on, but highs and lows from your perspective, what have you got?
The highs are pretty easy. You reset the clock on a lot of embarrassing runs of defeats and not winning at certain grounds. So obviously the win at Anfield, massively overdue. We've played much worse Liverpool teams over the years and lost, but we beat one of the best Liverpool teams that's ever played, even if they were on a low ebb at that time. So a win at Anfield was fantastic. As poor as the game was for the away at Arsenal, we reset the clock on winning away at Arsenal. There was the spell at the beginning of the season where we had 7 wins on the run and we were scoring for fun, got to the top of the charts. There was a couple of performances in December when injuries hit the team and Carlo Ancelotti really earned his money and he was pragmatic and put Ben Godfrey at left back. We beat Arsenal at home, we beat Chelsea at home. We flipped the script on Everton of recent years. We became better against the top teams and better away from home, which was the exact opposite of what has been the case since what feels like time began, about 10, just shy of 10 years maybe. We'd always been reliant heavily on home form and never laid a glove on the top teams, beat all the teams we were supposed to for the most part. So if you had to pick one high point, definitely the win at Anfield. A low point would be, well, the Tottenham game after lockdown, the first lockdown, where chances of Europe had gone away. I know there was worse performances after that, but that was just the end. The rest of the games were just, fulfilling. They felt like exhibition matches with nothing riding on them at that point. But at least that was tempered a little bit with, well, Carlo's going to go into a summer now and, he's going to add his own players. And I think, unfortunately, the lowest of the low points was Sheffield United at home this season, where once again, chances of European football disappeared completely. So yeah, Sheffield United at home and one season, Spurs at home the previous season were the lows, but by far tempered by a win away at Anfield, long overdue. Got the monkey off the club's back, and hopefully we don't see that monkey again for a long time.
You would really like to think so. And a lot of those high points, you didn't mention one I believe was a real high point for the club, was that opening day win away at Spurs. And again, it just ties into your point about winning away at top sides, which we hadn't done for so long, and something that we'd longed to do. We were often, as Ancelotti said himself, a low block looking to work on the counter with no real degree of control in a game. We were more reactive than proactive. What would your comment be on the development of Everton's footballing identity during that time?
I understand why you asked the question, because a lot of people didn't like Ancelotti's methods and style of football. I'm not someone who fell into that category. The style of football I want Everton to have is a style that wins. I want Everton's identity to be a team that regularly wins football matches. Don't get me wrong, there is a limit. There comes if every win was like that Arsenal win, it would probably grate eventually. The away Arsenal win, where it was a fluky goal and the team didn't play very well. But I think Carlo Ancelotti, being a good manager, took a good look at the team, the squad, the players he had, identified that he didn't have much creativity or much pace in attacking areas. What he did have were very strong players in aerial positions, like Calvert-Lewin, like Richarlison, and he had a strong physical defensive setup. So he focused on that. He drilled the team defensively. He got us really hard to break down and really, flexible in defensive positions, like back three, back five, back four. Playing Coleman on the right midfield to do a job on Andy Robertson, etc. But then where it broke down was when teams would come and play at Goodison Park and set up with the desire to just to do that exact same job on us, and the onus was on Everton to break those teams down. There was no sort of attacking quality to break them down. If they nullified Calvert-Lewin, then that was it. There was no one else who was going to, apart from the odd time when James Rodriguez played, let's be honest, when he played, teams just cottoned on to the tactic of let's just kick him and stop him playing. And I think that was, if the Real Madrid thing had now, and I think that's the step we'd have made this summer. I think he had identified areas of weakness in the team, and he's probably kept with the defensive sort of resolute style, counter-attacking style, but added more quality in attacking areas, more pace, players who can turn the opposition the other way and damage them. So whether we still buy those players or still go after those players remains to be seen, but I think he played to the team's strengths, and it wasn't always pleasant to watch, but it was effective, and effective football is better than attacking football. Effective football is how everyone wins titles and trophies, and that's ultimately the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, I've got a question on that, but you raised the James Rodriguez point, and because for the early part of this season I really identified with the football club for the first time in a while, and really thought we were going to do something special. Like even when we dropped off top spot, I was gutted because I wanted us to stay up and in and around the Champions League places. And that Boxing Day when we got ourselves back up to second, I was thinking, right, come on, home stretch, like we can do Europe here. Obviously ended up finishing 10th. James Rodriguez is a strange one now. Obviously, there was the allure of Carlo Ancelotti, as I'm sure this goes for probably Alan too, as I know Abdoulaye Doucouré was on the club's radar for a while. But are you scared, as I am, that a lot of these players, I think Richarlison included, and maybe, who knows, Calvert-Lewin, if he does have a good Euros and someone fancies coming in for him, are you worried that the better players that we've got, I wouldn't say the core of the starting 11, because I still don't think we quite know what our best starting 11 is, do you think that that's going to start to fall away with others in that football and hierarchy coming in and taking them?
No, I'm not scared of it. I understand why people would be, but it's happened a dozen times since I've supported Everton. We always it's just about how you bounce back. Leicester are the perfect example of how you can sell top players and get better for it, but you do need to have a bit of a bit of strategy, a bit of culture, even in the club to make the best of it. So there's some players we could stand to lose more than others. Like, so James Rodriguez is clearly the best footballer at the club by far. But if he was to decide, listen, I don't really want to be without Carlo Ancelotti, and he went off to the MLS or whatever, then we could recover from that. We would miss his quality, but he's injured half the season anyway, so it's not like the team would drastically decrease its points haul without him, because it plays a lot without him anyway. Calvert-Lewin would be very difficult to replace because he's a goal scorer, he's a finisher, he's got unique physical abilities, and the team is set up for him to score all the goals. So he would be a very difficult player to replace, and he has only just really replaced Romelu Lukaku himself, and think of how long that took. Everyone else, as much as I may like some of them, I've got a lot of players in this squad I really like, and I know the players who I don't like, who aren't as good, they're not going to fetch high fees, but if someone come in with a big fee for Richarlison, as much as I like him, fine, go out and replace him with younger, more young, sort of cheaper players who've got just as high a ceiling. You want to be. I always wanted, and the club even said this themselves once, but I said it a long time before that to anyone who'd listen. I want the club to be the Atletico Madrid, exactly, of England. But maybe I had it wrong. Maybe the idea was the Seville of England. Always selling players and accepting that that's part of their model, and making big money from them, but then. Or the Lille of England, people come in and buy you stars, but then you've got another one and another one and another one, and as it goes, you eventually win the French title, or in our case, win something here. But I don't fear losing players as a principle, but I don't have as much faith that the club's set up to implement that model as things are right now. I think if we were to lose any of our top players, we'd probably run around, panicking, just as we did when we've lost our top manager.
Yeah, and that nicely brings me to what I was going to ask, is that you've very much got a spectrum, the two ends of the spectrum, in that you can go for the identity of an Atletico Madrid, which I would take every single day of the week. I would take a 1-0 win every week until the last game of the season. And then on the other side of that, you've got like the Ajax or the Dortmund, where this is blooded through the academy, which I do feel like the club as a whole would really benefit from if, say Marcel Brands has a footballing philosophy and wanted to implement that from the ground up. I think that would go a hell of a long way in terms of the recruitment as well, because then somebody could just step in from the academy, which we haven't seen in a very, very long time. But there's always that sort of just the football hierarchy can come in, take what they want and leave. But I guess if you've got somebody coming in from the academy, then it doesn't really matter. But again, brings me to what I'm saying, that just the recruitment has not been up to scratch. So I don't have the confidence that if Everton were to lose the better players, that someone would come in and do a sufficient job, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's no guarantee, but there isn't a guarantee they wouldn't be able to either. It's just, excuse me, one of those things. I always used to say the Atletico Madrid of England, not because I wanted to be uber defensive, not that I'd mind that, but it was more the identifiable sort of style and the sort of siege football, like this is us and we don't care if you don't like us, we're going to bloody your nose anyway. That's Everton to me, and I want us to be like that and embrace that. Now, Marcel Brands, I don't think he has a set philosophy of this is the type of players I like and this is the type of players and style I want to play. I think he has been brought in to sort of facilitate. I think he can buy a variety of different players. We have to tell him what the style we want is. And what we've done is let him buy players for Marco Silva, like Bernard, players like that. And then instead of that, we've brought in and Carlo Ancelotti, and he's brought in the likes of Alan, who aren't the same at all. You know, we pay decent money for a player approaching 30, and we've not really let Marcel sort of set the tempo and set the style of player. We've basically had the manager tell him, and that's why we keep flipping about. But if we learn that lesson and then say to Marcel, this is our style, and we only want managers for that style, and we only want players for that style, and if a jumping off point is what Carlo did, which is, you know, not too far from what Atletico had. They didn't have the intensity of Atletico, but it's very early days, but they had the solid base to work from. Then Marcel could probably do that. He could probably find players who fit that mold, but he's not been allowed to do it. So there's always players who you love and you can't imagine being without. Do you remember when we had Kurt Zouma and he was key part of the back four with Michael Keane? No one even thinks about Kurt Zouma anymore because we've got Godfrey. We used to have Lukaku, and the sky fell in when we sold Lukaku, and now we've got Calvert-Lewin. We used to have Fellaini. He was a Champions League level player who we didn't want to lose and we had to let go. We always replace these players. It doesn't always happen as quickly as it should or as efficiently as it should, but we could always make that happen. We could always start doing better business.
Okay. Teddy, the eternal optimist.
Not to say we will, but we could.
So that leads me to, I guess, my final Everton question. Nuno Espirito Santo. Are you for it?
I mean, I guess like every single potential appointment is going to feel underwhelming after Ancelotti, but almost by accident, he's not a massive departure in style from what we had under Carlo. Whether he's got the personality to front up the job remains to be seen, but at least it's not wildly different in methodology, and the players have got to switch completely again into like, oh, well, now we're a gegenpress and, you know, high intensity team after being a solid defensive team for 18 months at least. There's a little bit of continuity in style, so I'm not entirely against it, but I need to be convinced because we've just had a superstar who I was really fond of, so I'm not going into his potential appointments full of enthusiasm, but I'm not against it either.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. Obviously, it's not official yet, but there are plenty of good reports saying that he's going to be the man for the job. And I think it was one of the lads from the American Toffee podcast who hit the nail on the head in saying that, you know, every single managerial appointment following Carlo Ancelotti isn't going to come close in regards to the excitement. Which I think is what a lot of people sort of crave when it comes to new signings, whether that be managers or players. And for me, just again, the standards that I hold the club to, I was just thinking, it's got to be Conte, it's got to be Conte, it's got to be Conte. And then I seen the quote come out when talks broke down with Spurs that if there's something not right with a podcast, with a project that he doesn't like, he's not afraid to walk away. I was like, oh shit, that rules Everton out. That
rules us out, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, put it this way, we as much as I loved Carlo Ancelotti, we clearly skipped a step and went straight to the star manager and didn't do the project builds phase. So, you know, next manager might not be as exciting, but put it this way, some of the nicest tasting food in the world isn't always good for you. So it might be time to try something healthy rather than something that tastes nice.
Well said, and God, I hope it's the right move for the club, because I do like Nuno. It's got to be said. I really like his personality, and especially during his first season in the Premier League with Wolves, even when he was in the Championship. Obviously, they were similar to Leeds in a sense, in that they were really sort of heavily marketed. You know, you've got the connection to George Mendes. And the philosophy of play that they had, obviously, with the back three and exciting players, Pedro Neto, Adama Traore, Raul Jimenez, Ruben Neves, who I'm an absolute fanboy for. But it seemed like when Raul Jimenez suffered that head injury, I think it was against Arsenal, they just seemed to drop off massively. And I guess it would be interesting to speak to someone from a Wolves perspective to see what Nuno could offer the club. I do like him. I like his personality, but I'm quite not scared, but I'm considerate of the fact that it could turn into another Roberto Martinez, if you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's. I like Nuno. I think he's a good manager. As I say, it lacks that wow factor of Carlo. But Wolves under Nuno in the first 2 years, they were pretty much exactly what we want Everton to be. They knew what they were, they embraced it, and they got good at it. This season or the previous season just gone, when the wheels came off Wolves a little bit, between injury and shock sale, all of their goals were taken out of the team. I defy anyone to do well after that. If Liverpool were to suddenly sell Mane at the 11th hour and then Salah would get a season-ending injury, then suddenly they wouldn't be scoring goals and wouldn't be very good either. So it's just, he was unfortunate in the last year, and I think he could do a good job at Everton, but he needs to be allowed to do a good job at Everton and be given the tools to do so. And I don't mean bring a load of Wolves players with him. I think set a style and let him play that style, and don't be trying to add players who don't suit it on the whims of agents and what have you.
Yeah, certainly. I think that brings a nice close to the Everton side of the conversation, and to end on a lighter note, a bit more light-hearted. It's tournament football. It's always exciting to watch. I don't think we've seen every team show us what they can do yet, but who are you fancying for the Euros this time round?
Bear with a slight technical issue.
No worries.
And I'm back. It's hard to look past France, isn't it?
Yeah.
If the world champions are European, typically they're the favourites for the following Euros, and I certainly don't think they've got any worse in that time since the World Cup. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go for France. For a dark horse, and they really are a dark horse. Italy,
yeah. It's got to be after that first game, hasn't it?
Exactly. Italy have always got a really strong team dynamic. They always know each other's game inside and out. The majority of the players all play in the same league. I know that's the same with England, but it doesn't always seem to work out for England. But I definitely think Italy are a dark horse because they've got the nous as a sporting nation to win these tournaments. But I can't see anything past France. The quality is just better than everyone else. And as for England, full of quality as we always are. We've gone into tournaments with better quality with the golden generation, but I'm yet to be convinced. I want to see us beat another top nation. Well, I've only ever seen, Croatia are a good team, and kudos for the win. But when we come out of the game and we've beaten Germany, we've beaten Italy, we've beaten France, then I believe we can win a tournament, because we haven't yet, even with this current crop of players, come up against another elite team and won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just on the France point, I would very much agree. I think Didier Deschamps is one of these men that has had a vision for what he wants France to be as a footballing nation, and the fact that he's put his beef with Karim Benzema to one side and just pulled him out the back pocket and said, I'll cope with Griezmann, Mbappe and Benzema. I think that is just, it's something else as a nation if you're able to pull that card. And if you look back at that spell of domination from Spain, they won the 2008 Euros, 2010 World Cup, and I think they won the 2012 Euros as well. I feel like we very may well be for a spell of French dominance similar to that.
I certainly wouldn't be surprised. It does feel that way, doesn't it? The quality they've got coming through, the amount of players.
So I'm awfully sorry about that, ladies and gents. On the top of the hour of mine and Terry's conversation, Terry ran into some technical difficulties, which was pretty much his iPad running out of battery, which coincided pretty nicely with the kickoff of the France-Germany game. So I don't think either of us were complaining, especially in this heat. And it was a fascinating game. Left a little bit to be desired in regards to the quality of the two sides, but that's what tournament football is all about. As the tournament goes on, you'd like to hope that both sides will realise their potential as they go on, which I think France certainly will. So yeah, I always enjoy talking to Terry. Spent several years working with him for Everton Newsfeed, among some tough years for Everton, but it was always a joy to talk to him as it was last night, and hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. I have hopefully got some good podcasts lined up, one in particular, over the coming weeks. So hopefully you'll tune in for them as well. Take care, everyone.